violence provokes violence, so we go around the same circle every 5 years or so. And I was hoping that wiser heads would prevail in that they recognized there was the attack was appalling. It was a huge security breach as well, I have to say, by the Israeli army too. How that allowed to happen, questions have to be asked. And at that stage, you do need wise heads which are saying, rather than have a large scale attack like this is the time that you use every mechanism you possibly can to secure negotiations for the future. I spoke at the demonstration yesterday and the demonstration last week, and I was holding a community meeting in my constituency yesterday morning to discuss the situation in Gaza. And yes, I'm one of those who are supporting a call for a ceasefire.
And what was your overall message? I mean, did you see this as a pro-Palestinian demonstration and therefore an anti-Israel demonstration?
No, the bulk of the people, I walked alongside a Jewish lady. I walked alongside a Palestinian who's unfortunately has lost family in Gaza now. And I felt that the overall tenor of the march itself was for peace, for a ceasefire. That was what the banners for me were saying. People have different motives for going on to demonstrations, but the overall tenor of it for me was ceasefire. And when I held my community meeting, which was inviting everybody of all different persuasions in, the overall theme was ceasefire. And how can we secure a ceasefire, secure the release of the hostages? People are extremely worried about the situation if the bombing and the attack goes on, the safety of the hostages, and also the scale of the loss of life. You know, from what we hear this morning, anything up to 8,000 civilians have been killed. It's horrendous. It's the pictures that are coming out are really distressing for everybody. And
So what do you feel it would have been legitimate for Israel to do in response to the terror attacks on October the 7th?
I was hoping that, you know, the Hamas attack has to be condemned. It was horrific atrocity. But in the experience that there has been with regard to Israel and Palestine over the last 70 years, I was hoping wiser heads could prevail, because actually violence provokes violence, so we go around the same circle every 5 years or so. And I was hoping that wiser heads would prevail in that they recognized there was the attack was appalling. It was a huge security breach as well, I have to say, by the Israeli army too. How that allowed to happen, questions have to be asked. And at that stage, you do need wise heads which are saying, rather than have a large scale attack like this is the time that you use every mechanism you possibly can to secure negotiations for the future. And the issue with regard to Hamas, we know they have relationships with Qatar, Turkey, and other nations that actually are engaging now with Israel more. It could have been used as a mechanism for a negotiation about a way forward. Problem is, violence breeds violence, and my worry is the bombing in Gaza now will just breed another generation of people who know nothing but war and simply want to use violence rather than negotiation. And you know, I've been in Parliament 25 years now, and I've seen several wars. We went through the Irish Troubles, and at that stage, if you remember, people like Mo Mowlam were just saying, let's have a ceasefire. Can we get a ceasefire? And as a result of that, negotiate a settlement for the future. And look at what.
But I mean, there is a question of how you see the settlement for the future. And your colleague, your former front bench colleague, Andy McDonnell, yesterday speaking at the rally, used the phrase "from the river to the sea." Is that a phrase which you yourself would use? Because, of course, yes, Israelis interpret that as wiping them out.
Well, I think that's a complete misinterpretation. When that phrase was generated, it was actually a phrase about how people can live together, but there has to be justice for the Palestinians in that settlement. And it's things like that that need talking through. If we could just talk rather than shout.
Yeah, but I mean, the truth is there are supporters of the Palestinians who do use that phrase in
Oh, yeah.
terms
Look,
of wiping out Israel.
yeah.
So is it a
No,
phrase that should be used?
There'll be supporters on either side that misinterpret or abuse language. Of course, they're on either side.
So is it a phrase you yourself would use?
I've used it in the past, of course, and have, because for me, it was about securing a settlement which recognized justice for the Palestinians. And, you know, some people are arguing there's a debate about whether or not a two-state solution is now possible. I still think it is, but there's a large number of people on all sides now thinking, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it is about finding a way in which people can live together in one state where rights are recognized on all sides. So we've got to start opening up these discussions. At least if we can talk, we can exclude the role of violence. That's the whole.
I mean, you might like to see that, but that would mean the end of both a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, which is what neither side want.
No, well, it's interesting because I work with both Palestinians and Israelis, Jewish Israelis. And again, there's all sorts of different ideas that have been floated that are on the agenda. Now, at the moment, I don't think a single state solution is possible. But it's interesting, that's come from a group of Jewish peace campaigners and academics. And on the other side, of course, the issue around this two-state solution that most of us are committed to is how can that be achieved when you've still got the incursion of the settlements into the West Bank and the violence that's incurring. Again, that needs to be addressed.
John McDonnell, can I ask a question just about what you said at the beginning of the interview about you were hoping that wiser heads could prevail and that rather than Israel launching a large-scale attack, it could have been used as a mechanism for negotiation. Can you see why some people might say that that is an unfair double standard, given that Hamas launched a terror attack on Israel, and your expectation is that Israel should use that as a platform for negotiations?
I'm not saying it's double standard because I've condemned the Hamas. I went along at Labour Party conference at the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and I was the first Labour MP to arrive, and I got up and spoke, and the first words I made was to condemn Hamas.
So have you called for Hamas to also stop firing rockets?
Yes, of course I have. Yes, I have.